Hi everybody, it's Rhonda. Welcome to I'm Just a Girl. Sorry I've been away for a week and a half, but life gets in the way sometimes of blogging. Okay, so tonight we are going to get into metabolism, carbohydrate metabolism, and basically how insulin resistance is adding to our level of inflammation, and that our food choices can help to kind of rewind some of that inflammation. Okay, so let's start with carbohydrates. When you take in a carbohydrate, it converts into glucose in your bloodstream, and then you release a hormone called insulin. And insulin comes and gets the glucose and brings it to your cells for energy, immediate energy. So think about it like this. Your cells, your muscle cells, all of the cells in your body that require energy have receptors on them, and you can think of them as like keyholes. And when you take in a carbohydrate, it literally releases insulin, which is like the key. Okay, so the key gets released and it goes in and unlocks the cell to bring the sugar in for energy. Now, the body has about 5 to 7 liters of blood in it, okay, running through it at all times. It would like to just stay like level and happy. 1 teaspoon, which is 5 grams of sugar, glucose floating through it. Now, if you consider that 1 piece of even whole grain toast can be anywhere from 18 carbs to no fiber, that's 18. And when you try to see how many teaspoons that is, you divide it by 5 grams. So I'll make it easier. So a piece of bread, that's 20 carbohydrates. 20 carbohydrates divided by 5 equals 4 teaspoons of glucose that you're going to produce. Your body, which has 5 to 7 liters of blood flowing through it, depending on who you are, only wants to just be at a level blood sugar. It wants to be dealing with 1 teaspoon. Okay, so how do you figure out how much blood sugar you should be going through to keep your body at a level of having an adequate insulin sensitivity, which means this, okay? Insulin resistance is this. If you take in a carbohydrate, you take the carbohydrate, you subtract the fiber, right? The number that's left is how much glucose you're going to produce. So let's just say you do take a piece of bread. Let's say it's 20 carbs minus 5 fiber. Fiber is undigestible, so it gets subtracted from the amount of glucose that's produced because your body can't absorb it, can't digest it, okay? So if it's 20 minus 5 fiber, you get 15 grams of net carb that will turn into glucose, blood sugar, okay? So your body, if it comes in excess of that, which for the most part we're all sending in an excess of that, okay? Like, I mean, even if it's and I know that we've all been taught, well, if it's a slower burning carb, it converts into glucose at a slower rate, and that is all true. But at the same time, at the end of the day, your body is still dealing with the same amount of insulin production, okay? So if your body is all day long producing insulin, your keyholes on the cells will start to shut down. And then your body's thinking, well, there's still too much sugar in the bloodstream. I need to send more keys, right? So your pancreas is what creates insulin, which that's who's sending the keys. After a certain amount of time of your body producing too much insulin, your pancreas will then start to lose function and shut down. And this is what we're calling, this is type 2 diabetes. So when you become slightly insulin resistant, you're going into that pre-diabetic phase, right? And then insulin resistance, you're closer, and then when your pancreas starts to stop producing insulin because it knows that your system just is not doing anything with it, that's diabetes. So this is all reversible right now. This is all reversible for everybody, okay? Because all you have to do is make sure that you follow these numbers. So this is a good rule of thumb for everybody to keep their blood sugar level. All right? And this is going to help everybody to kind of look at their food in a different way. So let me use a bigger carb. So say a cup of rice, right? A cup of rice is probably, 40 carbs, 1 or 2 fiber maybe. So that's 40 divided by 5 equals 8 teaspoons. 8 teaspoons. That's 1 cup of rice. That is 1 cup of rice. If you want to live healthy and at a level and not taxing your insulin production, your insulin sensitivity. So if you're insulin sensitive, that means it's working correctly. If you're insulin resistant, it means you're shutting down receptors. Okay? So if you want to keep your insulin functioning correctly and your body functioning correctly, you should take the carbohydrate, subtract the fiber, take that number at the end of the day, divide it by 5, and whatever that number is should be less, 10 or less. 10 or less. Okay, so if a bagel, like a big bagel, is 50 to no fiber, that means it's 50 grams of net carbs. That means you divide that by 5, and you're already at 10. You're already at 10. So think about if you eat this way all day. So even an apple is like 25 carbs to 5 fiber? That's 20. So 20 divided by 5 equals 4. You're at 4 just from an apple. So a lot of our food choices that we think are very healthy, we've got to be mindful of taking care of our insulin response. All right? So your carbohydrates need to be beneficial, that they're full of fiber, and that they're low in sugar, and that there shouldn't be any added sugars. So when people ask, how much sugar do I need in my diet? None. You need none, because your body will make its own glucose. So when I say 5 to 7 liters of blood in the body and it wants 1 teaspoon of glucose, if you take in no sugar, it will make that sugar. It will make that sugar because it will make it out of protein. It will make it out of carbs. It will break things down to make glucose. The only thing that doesn't produce glucose is fat. So, I'll leave you with this. In the 1950s, there was a scientist. His name was Ansel Keys. And it was when heart disease started to become prevalent. And he, to make a name for himself, kind of fudged the science so that people started to believe that fat and saturated fat were what were killing them, what were clogging their arteries, and that cholesterol was what was causing us all these issues. The truth of the matter is that when that happened, we had to, the FDA had to recommend us filling in our calories with something else. So they couldn't do it with protein, because if we just ate all protein, our kidneys would shut down. So they said, let's fill it in with more carbohydrates. And so we, as this generation, since the 1950s, have been trained to eat more carbohydrates and less fat. And we have basically created insulin resistance. So it is reversible, but it won't be forever. And especially with our kids, we're kind of like really giving them way, way, way too much carbs and sugar. So we need to try to reel that in. We need to add in healthy fats. And think about this. If a bagel does that, if a bagel is 50 to no fiber, so you divide that number by 5, you get 10 teaspoons. You're done for the day, right? 2 pounds of broccoli is 20 net carbs. 2 pounds. Divide that by 5, and you're still only at 4 teaspoons of sugar in your bloodstream. So can you imagine how many green vegetables you can eat? Like as many as you want, as much as you want, right? But you have to be more mindful when it comes to a potato or rice. You have to actually do that math and say, okay, how much sugar am I producing today? And be responsible for it. We all have to be responsible for it, because honestly, the more insulin is your fat storing hormone. The more fat you are holding on your body, fat produces inflammatory cytokines. Fat produces inflammatory response. And then inflammatory response tells your body to hold on to fat. All right, so it's a circle. It's a circle. The more insulin you produce, the more fat you store. The more fat you store, the more inflammation gets created. The more inflammation, the more fat. So I decided to start with glucose metabolism and how much and how you can control your insulin resistance in order to kind of get you thinking about how you're going to stop this cycle of inflammation. So let's start with being mindful of how much insulin we produce in a day, being mindful of how much sugar we take in, and let's try to start there. All right, and hopefully on my next one we'll go into a little bit more of that, but a little bit on autoimmunity as well. So let's try to do the math. Carbs minus fiber equals net carbs. At the end of the day, divide that number of net carbs by 5, and we want to be 10 or less. 10 or less. You can do that. You can eat vegetables like crazy. All right. Peace. Have a good night.